Angel would like to come up and he's got some stuff to talk about, and I'm going to try to pull up some images while he talks if I can. Angel's on TikTok, Angels_of_lights, and he does his incredible lives, and I go on lots of times, and he doesn't let the Globers ask him about flat Earth. He makes them present their proofs, and it's ridiculous.
Hey guys. Okay, no worries. Alright guys, well I came all the way over from Upside Down World. Alright, so guys, I'm going to touch on a few things. Dave might have already talked about some of the stuff, but that's okay. So the horizon in reality is the limitations of our vision. So basically, the same reason why a hallway converges to a point is the same reason why we have a horizon that we see at the beach. The ground ramps up towards eye level, the sky ramps down towards eye level, and it creates that horizontal eye zone. But on a globe, it's the physical limitations of the sphere. Now, the sphere is a given size. It's 3959 miles in radius, which means they've given us the number of how big the Earth actually is. Which means the horizon should be no further than 1.225 miles times the square root of the observer site in feet. Which means for a 1 foot observer, the horizon should be 1.22 miles away. For a 6 foot observer, it should be 3 miles away, and so on. But as Dave showed earlier, we've got observations where the horizon is literally behind and further out than what it should be. He showed you those O-rings. The O-rings were a certain distance away, and they stay that distance. They're just place markers. And the horizon was behind them. So you have to believe this. I debate a lot of globies, right? They try to tell me that the physical hill that blocks boats going away from you has physically moved behind another physical object. So that's like saying, if you duck behind a hill, I'd lose line of sight to you, but introduce weather conditions, and that physical hill is now going to be behind you so that I can see you. So that's basically what they're trying to claim, which is just insane. So also the Chicago skyline, it's funny because you know, they try to say, oh, well, there's no evidence for flat Earth. I'm like, okay, great. Well, I pull up the picture of the Chicago skyline, and I'm like, do you see the skyline in this image? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, welcome to flat Earth. Like, it's that easy. So like, and then they're confused, right? Because most of the people that come up to debate me, they don't even know their own globe belief. They don't but they're defended to the death, but they don't actually know anything about it. So then I have to explain it to them. I'm like, well, you just said you could see the skyline, right? And they're like, yeah. Well, that's the entire skyline. It should be below the curve. So again, if you duck behind a hill, I don't see you. You're physically obstructed. So if a physical hill of Earth curve is obstructing something, you can't see it. And the globe proponents want to tell me that it's a holographic projection wrapping around the globe so that it's placing it right there on the horizon so that I can see it. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't believe in holograms like that. So, a lot of the people want to come up and tell me, oh, but I'm like, well, what's your best evidence for the globe? And they say, gravity. Like, great. So the reason why things fall down is suddenly a globe evidence, right? So on a flat Earth, I guess gravity would be density, buoyancy, and electrostatics. So we've got, so a helium balloon is just less dense than medium, so it floats. It seeks equilibrium up. And a rock is more dense than the air, so it goes down. It seeks equilibrium the other way. So it's Archimedes' principle, basically. Now, we have an electrostatic gradient in the atmosphere, which is constantly discharging to the Earth and creating a small downward bias. But the force of buoyancy supersedes that to determine directionality. So basically, if I drop a rock in water, it falls through the water because it's more dense than the water. And like I said, the helium balloon will rise and seek equilibrium the other way. Now, it's funny because they want to claim that when things have more mass, they have more gravity. You know, that's why the Earth is a sphere, That's why the moon is a sphere. So I asked them, okay, so if things have more mass, they coalesce into balls. They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, great. So what has more mass, the Earth or the Milky Way galaxy? And then they're like, oh, well, yeah, the Milky Way galaxy has more mass, of course. I'm like, great, so why is the Milky Way galaxy a flat disk? Right, so it makes no sense.
So the flatness problem, right?
Exactly. Well, the flatness problem is actually the whole universe being flat. So that's another thing I say to them. I'm like, well, do you believe in the Big Bang? Did they expand outwards in all directions? And they say yes. I'm like, great, why is the universe flat then? So every experiment ever done to prove Earth's motion has actually failed. There was a famous experiment done called the Michelson-Morley experiment, which actually they tried to detect the orbit around the sun of the Earth, and they came up with no result. Now, there's a thing called the Copernican principle, which basically states that we're unimportant, tucked away in a corner, and they have to avoid geocentrism at all costs, which means that they have to avoid the notion of Earth not moving and being the center of creation. But it's quite funny because all of the proofs and tests done actually prove that we are the center. So basically that's why Einstein had to come in and create his model of gravity, because they had to change it all. They had to change it from Newtonian to Einsteinian, basically because of the Michelson-Morley experiment. So instead of just saying, okay, shit, well, we couldn't detect Earth motion, I guess Earth isn't moving, they had to abide by the Copernican principle and discard it and basically come up with a solution so that the Earth is still moving, basically. So, in terms of Earth spinning, turning is acceleration. Okay, so now acceleration can be detected with an accelerometer, or you can actually just feel it. So if you're inside of a plane and the plane starts turning at a constant rate, it's accelerating because you're constantly changing directions. And obviously you can feel that at 500 miles an hour, you'll feel that easily. So the thing is, you've got to remember, the Earth, they claim that the Earth is spinning 1,037 miles an hour at the equator. Now, we don't feel that, we can't detect that. So there you go. Now, what else we got here? So it's funny, a hovering helicopter, okay, get this. So they claim it actually spins with the Earth, right? So the world record for a hovering helicopter is 50 hours, I believe. So you have to believe that the helicopter spun with the Earth in space and actually did a circle in space. So the problem with that is, again, turning is acceleration. Acceleration requires more energy in order to keep that object moving and changing directions constantly. So that's a violation of the first law of thermodynamics. That can't happen. So a hovering helicopter on the globe paradigm violates the first law of thermodynamics, which is pretty funny. So we've got airplane straight and level flight. Now, I love talking to pilots and debating pilots because whether they like it or not, they have to treat the Earth as flat and stationary when they're flying. And that's just simply because there is no Earth curve and there is no rotation to adjust for. So basically, you have a sphere and you want to fly over the sphere. Now, you're going to have to change the plane's orientation to fly around that sphere. But that actually doesn't happen. Every pilot I debate admits they never need to nose down. So the SR-71 Blackbird, I think it goes 2,500 miles per hour, would have to constantly nose down in order to keep up with that speed. And that plane would literally break apart if it was to actually change directions while flying at that speed. It could only do a straight line with that speed. We've actually got pitch data as well to support that planes do not adjust for curvature, and they keep a constant nose up. In order to maintain lift, they actually have to have a slightly nose up, so 2 degrees nose up to have the air going underneath the plane to maintain lift. And I actually felt it on the way here. For the 15 hours flight, I could literally feel that I was like leaning back 2 degrees on the plane the whole time.
There's gravity, right?
Yeah, of course. And you know, some of the Globies, they do say that. They're like, oh, well, gravity just tethers you along. Well, actually, even if I grant them that, gravity would have to be selective and only pull the nose of the plane down as it's flying, which, gravity's not sentient, so. And the other thing I wanted to touch on was, gas pressure. So the fact that we're breathing air, okay, the definition of gas pressure is the amount of force exerted by the particles on the walls of a container, right? So basically we have 14.7 psi at sea level and we're breathing it. Yes, it does go less as it go higher, but that's called a density gradient. So density gradients require containment too. So basically just because it gets less pressure as you go higher doesn't mean it suddenly doesn't need a container anymore. And even if it did reach such a low pressure up there that it was a vacuum, well, vacuums require containment too. You can't make a vacuum and remove molecules from an area without a container either. So the globe violates the second law of thermodynamics as well, because all of the air we're currently breathing would just rapidly escape into the vacuum and we'd have no air to breathe. Then all the oceans would boil and we'd all be dead. Now, the globe's answer to this is basically gravity is holding down the gases. Well, gases move randomly in all directions, right? So if you're in a car, you spray gas in the car, open the sunroof, the gases just are going to escape, right? So gravity doesn't hold them down, they move randomly in all directions. And also another thing is they try to mention so they have a law called the law of atmospheres, which basically describes as you go higher, the gases get thinner and thinner. And I bait them into this because it's funny because they claim to have an ozone layer around the Earth. And by the way, gases don't even layer out either. If you put multiple different gases into a box of different densities, they don't layer out. They mix all together and spread in all directions. So basically they claim to have the ozone layer, but ozone is more dense than air, right? So according to their own belief system, the ozone layer would drop to the floor, basically.
Just like clouds. How do clouds stay in the air? They're heavier than the air. Where's all that water floating up there?
Exactly, true, yes. That fall to the ground. Now also, even if the vacuum of space did exist, which it doesn't, but even if it did exist, space travel violates Newton's third law. So if you are in a boat and the boat's propeller is pushing off the water to push along, and if you're in a plane, the plane pushes off the air, and the rocket pushes off nothing, so it can't work. And then they want to tell you that basically the rocket's pushing off itself. So that's like me standing on the skateboard, pushing the back of my head and expecting me to move forward. That doesn't happen. So, but yeah, that's about all I had for now. Just to piggyback off Dave. So yeah, I appreciate it, guys.
Catch us on Angels Live on TikTok. He's on usually 11 East Coast time because he's in another part of the world. And he lets boulders up one at a time and then he just destroys them. Yeah. In the nicest way. All right, thanks everybody.
Get tickets to this year's event at internationaltruthexpo.com.